Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Early Morning Core. I'm your host, Tristan, and today we are going to be covering The Ritual from 2017. It is a Netflix original, and it is it's like my second favorite horror movie of all time. I fucking love this movie. It is one that I have been rewatching, I don't know how many times. I have seen it many, many times, and I never get tired of it. It's beautiful. I love the setting. I love the creature. I love the cast. I love the pacing. Everything about it. Now, if you have experience with the book and with the movie, then you are going to know that there are quite a bit of differences, especially in like the second half, but a lot of the stuff is the same. Like uh the order that the group dies in, some of the issues like how Dom's knee is jacked up in both of them, Phil's feet are jacked up in both of them. They see the animal up in the tree first. They do go and stay in the creepy ass cabin. Like stuff like that is similar, but there are just as many, if not more, differences. Uh, but yeah, like I said, I love this movie. If you have not seen it, please go check it out. And if you have not read the book or listened to the book or anything like that, I will just as strongly suggest to go check it out. Like I said, they are different, but they're still good. I would say, like, if there was like a full, proper, faithful adaptation of the book, it would be like a limited series or something on Netflix. But I'm appreciative of what we got. So okay. Couple little facts that we got. I'm gonna do the same thing as last time, and I'm going to save the trivia stuff for the end of the episode after I done covered the whole movie. But the director is David Bruckner. Seems like he was mainly known for like TV stuff. With the writer being Joe Barton. The budget was $1 million, which is, like we've established before, not much when it comes to horror movies. Obsession had like 745,000 dollar budget or something like that. But the budget was 1 million, and it ended up grossing 1.78 million. So not much of profit, but and the ratings are kind of middle. Rotten Tomatoes gave it a 74%. IMDb gave it a 6.4 out of 10, and Letterboxd gave it a 3.3 out of 5. Uh, so yeah, like I said, it was a great movie. I'm just going to go ahead and repeat that now before I talk about it because I've got one, two. Okay, I've only got 2 pages of notes. Don't worry. Okay, this shouldn't take us that long. Uh, takes place in Sweden for the most part. Okay. But let's jump right into it. Movie starts off with a group of guys in a bar discussing where they want to vacation. I think it's Robert says Ibiza. No, not Robert. Maybe Phil. Can't remember who says it. I don't have it written down. I'm already starting off horrible. But they say that they are too old for Ibiza, 9 to Berlin, and what's in Belgium, where I do know that this was Dom. And Dom is like beer with 47% alcohol or something, which sounds amazing. But this is Robert. Robert says, "What about hiking?" Luke says, oh, wait. What? Okay. My God. This episode's not going the best right now. I don't know why. Okay. There's like a little bit of a gap in my notes right now. I guess I got distracted by watching the movie. But Robert goes, "What about hiking?" And they're like, "Nah, absolutely not." They don't want to go hiking. But the group's walking away from the bar, and then Luke says, "Hey, I'm gonna go in here and hit the bottle. Anyone want to come with me?" The other guys are like, "Nah, it's a school night, can't do that." And Robert comes in with them, and Luke is complaining to Robert about Phil wanting brunch. He's like, "Fucking brunch. Avocados on toast." And Robert's like, "I kind of like avocados." And then Luke starts saying something else about Dom, saying Dom's become a real shame, like as of late. He's become almost like an embarrassment. What a shame. And then Robert said, "Yeah, a shame. Successful businessman with beautiful wife and children." And Luke is like, "Yeah, man." And then as soon as he starts to reply back, he looks behind Robert, and there's a woman sitting down on the ground who is bruised up and got a bloody nose and everything. And then these two guys come out of the back, and they've got another guy. They are obviously robbing the place, and Luke immediately ducks behind one of the aisles to where he's out of sight and kind of leaves Rob. Which sucks, but the robbers proceed to come over there and start to rob. And they take his watch, they take his wallet, and then whenever they ask for his ring, he says no. Which, dude, come on, man. I think I'd rather go back home to my wife and my son than to keep my ring. That's quite literally why my ring that I wear on my ring finger is like a $22 ring off of Amazon. But he says no, and there's arguments, and Rob looks at Luke, and Luke is just like, "No, man." Uh, which Luke did have a bottle, and he did turn the bottle around in his hand to where he's holding it like a baton or like a bat or something. So it seemed like he was trying to muster up the courage to go and fight, but just wasn't there yet. And then this crackhead dude just pulls, like, I'm gonna say it's an aluminum bat or it's a pipe, but he brings it back, and then he strikes Robert across the face, and it rips his cheek open, and he goes down, and Robert tries to look up, and then this robber dude proceeds to whack him again in the back of the head. I think he does take his ring, and then uh and then it cuts to Luke coming out of a tent on the side of a mountain. So we can go ahead and assume that they are doing what Rob wanted and are hiking now. They're hiking the King's Trail in Sweden, which rides on the border of Sweden and Norway, I believe. But yeah, they wake up on the side of a mountain 6 months later. And yeah, Luke is smoking a cigarette, and I'm going to assume that maybe he picked up that bad habit after Rob died. I don't know. But Hutch steps out and he's like, "Morning. Fuck, it's cold. I'm gonna make some coffee." So, uh, they get everything packed up, and we see the four friends again. We see that it is all four of them. It is Luke, Dom, Phil, and Hutch. And Hutch proceeds to talk about these mountains and this trail, and he says, uh, "These mountains were smashed out by Nordic gods with big bastard hammers," which sounds really cool when you talk about it that way. I love that viewpoint on how Sweden mountains look, or Swedish mountains look, I should say. Uh, yeah, they are doing some hiking, and uh, Dom kind of starts complaining, and he's like, there's walking trails in England, right? With pubs, which also sounds cool. I would love to. I would love to do a walking trail of some sort, and there be a pub at the end. That'd be freaking nice. But they end up setting up like the rock type of memorial thing, like where you stack a bunch of rocks up. But they set up like a memorial. It's got his picture. It's got like his dog's favorite toy. It's got like a scarf, I think. Uh, but they set up this memorial, and they all take a sip of whiskey from a flask, and then they proceed to dump out the flask at the end, and it takes like 5 seconds too long, it feels like, and it feels like it's going on forever with how long he's pouring. It's just pouring out very slowly, but it's a little bit of a comedic moment because I think it's Phil that's kind of like staring at the flask as he's pouring it out, like, is it empty yet? Like, but yeah, they also leave the flask up there, and uh Hutch kind of confirmed that people blame Luke by saying that he doesn't. So the way that the line goes is that, "I don't care what anyone else says. I don't blame you for Rob's death." And it's like, so people have been saying it. Like, but uh that kind of sucks. And do I write down when? Okay, never mind. Okay, yeah, this is when Dom messes up his knee. They are hiking again, and a little bit more of comedy is when Dom says, "Sweden can lick my bridge," and then Phil is like, "Bridge? What's bridge?" He's like, "My gooch." But it's like right after he says that, he ends up jacking up his knee real bad. Uh, but he like steps wrong and then goes forward and he goes down and he's like, "Oh fuck, my knee is fucked. It's my meniscus. I know it's my meniscus. It's fucked." Uh, and then Luke and Hutch are immediately like, "Oh damn it, Dom, don't be doing this to us." And they kind of mention how Dom likes to exaggerate. They're like, "It's not as bad as it seems." And Hutch is like, "It's definitely not as bad as it seems, but we may end up carrying him out like a Egyptian princess if we're not careful." But Hutch says, "Okay, I'm going to look at the map. I'll see what we can do as far as like shortcuts because they've got like another 14 hours of hiking." Uh, but Hutch kind of explains that they can go southwest through the forest, and that would have cut their trip in like half. Which, look, I'm going to go ahead and say this is like the first thing that I learned about hiking and backpacking and anything. Don't go off the trail, okay? You don't want to go off the trail because that is how people get lost, even with compasses. If you go off trail, there's more likely that you are going to get injured. Not only that, sure, you may be doing it for Dom's knee because you see it as a shortcut, but what you don't know is what kind of terrain is it that he's going to be walking on. I mean, because he may end up having to scale a fucking mountain to cut that trip in half instead of using the trail that is already established. I'm saying this from my own point of view. I'm putting myself in any of their shoes. We're not taking that shortcut. And also, Hutch does say, there could be wildlife, could be a bit interesting. I would be the very opposite. I'm like, oh, wildlife, something that can fucking eat us? No. And we aren't armed. We don't have guns. We've got one pocket knife between the four of us. Absolutely not. Anyways, back to it. Hutch does kind of, I think Luke was a little bit against it, but whenever they're like, Dom, look, we've got another 6 hours of hiking before we set up camp, and we've got like another 8 hours tomorrow. What do you want us to do? And Dom was like, well, fuck me. And he's like, I'm absolutely not going to make it. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be able to do that. But they end up trying to go through the forest, and they do make like a joke saying that he would have found something to trip over in Vegas as well, because Dom does say, he's like, should have went to Vegas, and they're like, you would have found something to trip over in Vegas too. And he said, yeah, a massive pile of tits, which was funny. But they're they are on their way to the forest, like the edge of the forest, and they see like this van looking thing. It's old, it's been there forever, it's like overgrown and stuff. One of them say, that's an interesting place to park. And then I think it is Hutch that says, yeah, my daughters are obsessed with those vans because the neighbor has one. And then Phil proceeds to say, I got a hand job in one of those. And Dom is like, what a lovely story, Phil. But okay, this is one of those things about the cast that I love, is they sell this stuff like they are friends for many years. Like because they just have those little moments of understanding, and just they sound like they actually like each other, which is something that we have seen lack of in a lot of movies, is the characters seeming like they would even be friends. But this one does it very well. But they're hiking for a bit, and they stop to take a break. And we're kind of already noticing like Phil trying to adjust his shoes, because he does say that he got the wrong shoes, and it looks like he's wearing a little bit fancier of shoes. I don't know what they are, but they don't look like hiking shoes. But he's like having to mess with them and adjust them. I did not notice, or I didn't look for it in the movie, but in the book, Phil also wears like jeans, which is not good to hike in, especially if it gets rainy. You're going to be chafing. It's going to be bad. But Uh, we already see that the shoes are affecting him, as well as Dom's knee. But they don't take that long. They get back up and they're hiking some more, and they talk about food that they would eat. And Luke says he'd take a chicken kebab, and Dom says he would take a McDonald's meal with nobody around to mess with them. Hutch says like a steak, and Phil says sushi. And then I think it's Dom that mentions Robert saying that he would like a chicken kebab as well or something. But they're talking about this, and then they see something dark in this tree, and it is like an elk with its guts ripped out. Like this elk is high up in this tree. But they see this elk up in the tree, and they get distracted by it a little bit. They're like, now what the fuck would do that? And then Phil says, maybe a bear did that? And Dom says, did bears usually do that? And Phil's like, I'm not the fucking bear expert. But yeah, they get pretty spooked. I would too. That would be like my warning sign of I need to get out of these woods. Because if something can do that to an elk, I'm only gonna imagine what it can do to me. But it starts thunderstorming, and they're hiking, and they're like, okay, look, we need to set up shelter now. Like, we need to set up camp. Right before they see the side of this wooden cabin. And they're like, hey, look, shelter, we should go in there. And it's like, two of them are for it. The other two are like, no, not really. But they do see some runes like carved into the tree outside of it. They see like some runes, and then they see the house behind it, but they end up going inside this cabin, and Luke is about to step in, but he hears like the creature roaring right before he steps inside, and one of them says, "This the house we get murdered in." But Hutch is like, "Okay, I'm gonna try and get this stove going, warm up." I will say this is one of those survival situations that I would agree with. I don't think I would have wanted to take the time to take my tent out and then set it up while it's raining and cold, because my tent will then get soaked and will be cold. So I'm like, I think I'd rather be in the creepy ass cabin too. But there's an upstairs, and Hutch is like, Hutch says, well, go on, Phil, you're nearest. And upstairs has some creepy shit in it. It's got like this standing idol thing for, it's got like antlers for hands, and its torso is made out of straw, and it's got weird feet that look like chicken feet. But yeah, they all see it, and they're Phil is the one that says that it is witchcraft, and I mean, yeah, it kind of looks like that, doesn't it? But they all go back downstairs. They've got this fire started, and Phil is like, I'll give any of you $1,000 to go up there and sleep with it. And I think it's Dom that says my wife would never forgive me. But Luke does wake up like in the middle of the night or something, and there's like a bright light outside. Like, I'm talking UFO looking bright. I mean, it is insane from outside. So he steps outside, and we see the liquor store. Like, we see the walls of the liquor store and the LEDs, but the ground is still like the forest floor. It looks really cool. But he walks over to the bottle that he grabbed that day, and he picks it up, and there's like blood that drips on it, and he looks up, and the like wall from the liquor store like snatches away. It looks so fucking cool. But we see that his chest is bleeding from 5 holes in the center of his chest. Like, somebody stuck their fingers in his chest. And he is outside. And we see like stuff being moved in the forest, like something big was running. But we hear some yelling, and he runs back inside and wakes up Hutch and turns on the flashlight, and Hutch has pissed his pants. He was yelling. Dom is crying for his wife Gail and wake him up, and he was like freaking out too. We see his knee in a glimpse, and his knee is jacked up. It's like swollen and everything. They're like, "Where's Phil?" And they go upstairs, and they see Phil's clothes being like scattered. And Phil has stripped down naked and is now praying to this thing. Like, he is on his knees praying to it. Looks really creepy. But they are like, okay, let's get the fuck out of here. And Hutch is standing outside. Looks like he is in some sort of trance or something. Like, he is just staring. And while they are leaving, they notice that there are runes on all the trees. Like, all of the trees around this cabin. They notice this, and they're like, this place is fucked. But Dom kind of is like, well, look, you said we would be done. All right, you said we would be done. And Hutch is like, well, look, the rain and the elk slowed us down. I mean, what do you want me to say? So Dom decides, he's like, well, I'm going to go this way instead. So he starts following the path that leads to the cabin, which is a different path altogether. Instead of going southwest, which is the direction they should have went. But Phil, while they're hiking, he wants to talk about it, but Hutch doesn't. He's like, look, I woke up covered in piss. I don't want to psychoanalyze it right now. And so does Dom. They were just saying that they were spooked and it was just nightmares. And Phil says something that kind of makes sense. He's like, outside, I'd never have done that. Which, I mean, I think most people would not strip down naked and pray to some creepy looking shit like that. I just don't think you would do that in your sleep. I think you'd naturally be afraid of it. But Dom points out like the small tree stumps that were like cut down and charred, pointing out that they are man-made. He's like, man-made trails lead to civilization. But he points that stuff out, and they end up finding another cabin, but they are like, fuck that. Let's keep moving. They move on, and Dom is like, okay, I need to take a break. I'm in fucking agony. And Hutch is like, you're not in agony. I think you're uncomfortable, but you're going to have to push past the pain barrier a bit. And that's when Dom is like, oh, I'm not past the pain barrier. I'm in fucking agony or something. But Luke is like, get up. And Dom, no. But Phil is also going to take a break, and Luke tells Hutch that he is going to head to the top, see, because he thinks it's like a ridge. He's like, I'm going to head up there and I'm going to see what I can see. And Hutch is like, okay, right there and back, yeah. But Luke heads up there, and it is like flat, but a lot of trees. It looks really nice though, but he starts to focus on something, and we start to focus too, and we see like this arm wrapped around one of the trees, and we see the back of the hand facing Luke before the hand comes away, and then we see something big move like in the back. Can't really tell what it is. You just see something really big move. But Luke heads back down, and he's like, something is up there and it's big. And then he starts to show his chest. He's like, look, this happened last night. And Dom says that, look, you did that to yourself. I mean, you walked into a tree or something. And Luke is like, you fucking what? I didn't walk into a tree. Like, why don't you believe me? And Dom says that, well, I simply don't blame your judgment or something like that. And Luke is like, what are you talking about? Hutch is trying to stop Dom, like, hey, shut up. And Dom is like, no, I'm going to tell him. And Dom, Luke ends up pushing Dom, and Dom says, where was that fight with Rob? You can fight your friends, but you can't protect them or stand up for them or something like that. And Dom does end up catching a punch to the nose and falling down. And Hutch is like, man, what are you doing? And Dom is like, he broke my nose. He broke my nose. And Hutch is like, you've not broken your nose. But in the book, it is a bit more of a beatdown. It is like, instead of one punch to the nose, it's like a broken nose and jacked up jaw and everything. Like, he fucks up Dom. But they start hiking again, and they end up finding this old tent with a wallet, and the card in it expired in like 1984. But they end up setting camp, and Hutch is dividing up like these energy bars to everybody. And Hutch is telling Luke that Dom's knee looks real bad, and saying, "Look, Luke, you're like the strongest of us. You should head southwest and get help. Like as soon as morning hits, you go." And to go get help. And then Hutch goes off and sees Phil and is checking on his feet and everything, and he's got like blisters and stuff. But Luke goes into his tent and he hears the creature, so he unzips his tent and he looks around and he sees the liquor store scene again. But this time, the robbers look up at him and call him a coward, and their eyes look weird and everything. It's very creepy type of scene. But then we see that Hutch gets snatched, like, out of his tent. Like, his tent gets ripped open, and Hutch is snatched out of it, and he's screaming. Phil is outside, like, praying to it, and he's like, oh my god, I don't know what I've seen. All I've seen were shadows. And Dom looked like he might have been praying to it too, with how he was positioned. But they go running for Hutch because he's screaming in the distance, but Dom ends up saying, he's like, look, we need to head back, okay? Because if we get lost, we are completely fucked. And they left all of their stuff, but the cuts to morning, and yeah, they did not find their way back. So they have, like, absolutely nothing. But they do end up finding Hutch, and he is put up in a tree, guts ripped out and everything. They take him out of the tree, and they bury him under a bunch of sticks. They grab Luke's compass. Not Luke's compass. They grab Hutch's compass and his pocket knife. And Luke starts to talk about what he's seen up at the top before. He's like, look, I seen something up there. But Luke is the one saying that it is a creature. Phil is the one saying it's a creature. Dom is still saying that it is whack job humans. And Luke is saying, look, there are 3 of us and 1 of it, and I've got a fucking knife. Which does not mean much to me, because guess what? Hutch had that knife too. But we see them, like, kind of scaling this incline of some sort, and then we see this giant thing move in the background. Like, it was kind of one of those things of, you're not going to notice it until it moves. It's really cool looking. But Phil ends up slipping, and Luke catches him and pulls him up, and Phil is like, you should just leave me. Like, but Luke is like, okay, you guys rest up. I'm going to scout up ahead. And he runs to this spot, and he can actually see the end. He can see the end of the forest. And Luke is looking at the compass. He's like, Hutch was right. Hutch was right. We just had to head southwest, and they would have gotten out. But he heads back, and Phil was... It's like dark now, but Luke is looking at Phil, and Phil is looking around. He's got his flashlight out, and he turns away, and then this thing grabs Phil, snatches him away, and Phil drops his flashlight. But after he sees that, Luke tries to run. He tries to run away, and he ends up running and hitting a tree really hard. Kind of like knocks himself out. But he wakes up, and he sees the liquor store again. And this time he steps out of the liquor store, and he sees Phil, Hutch, and Dom there. And then Phil kind of turns to him and raises up a flashlight and points it at him. And then we cut to... Well, we don't cut, but it now shows the forest, and the flashlight just drops in front of him. And he walks over, and he picks it up, and Okay, this is how I wrote it. I said, Phil shines his light, and then the illusion goes away, and Phil's flashlight falls. And then Luke picks up the flashlight, and he finds Dom hiding. So he walks over to him, and he's like, hey, look, I found a way out. Okay, we aren't that far off, but we got to get going, because that thing's going to come back. Dom is like, okay, piggyback. And Luke is like, we're going to have to run. Which is a little bit of a funny moment. Sorry. But they're like, okay, on one, we're going to go. 3, 2, 1. And neither one of them move. And they're like, okay, let's go. But they get up, they start going. Luke is like helping support him. They hear some stuff and they stop. They start looking around. And I'm like, don't fucking stop to look around. You keep moving. And then this thing kind of like starts shaking up trees, and they take off and they make it to this trail, and then they see Phil in the trees with this on this path. But they're running on this path, and then they run right into this wooden building just in time to hear the folk music and get knocked out. So, fun times. They get like kicked, which I don't know if it's a coincidence, but there is a really tall man in the book that belongs to the cult named Loki. I don't know if that's just coincidence that the cult in the movie also has a really tall man, but yeah, they get knocked out, and then they get taken to this room, and they get like tied up, and Luke makes a hole in the wall because it's got like dirt in between the wooden boards. So that way he can see what they're doing outside, and they're setting up this cross type thing. It is a rune as well. I forget which one it's called, but Dom makes the suggestion to try to get the bottle on this table that's closer to Luke. And while he's trying to do that, this old lady comes in and gives Luke some water before showing that she has like the same 5 finger holes in her chest as Luke. But they end up taking Dom without giving him water. They knock him out, and this woman comes in after they leave and tells Luke that they prepare for sacrifice and that it'll all be over soon. But we can hear like Dom screaming upstairs. He's getting tortured for sure. But they bring Dom back, and he tells Luke to burn this place down and to tell Gail that he tried to get back to her. And Luke is kind of getting emotional. He's like, no, 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 no. I'm not going to have to do that. You're going to tell her yourself. And it's a sad scene. It's not as similar in fashion as the one in the book. In the book, they kind of just naturally repair their relationship, which I'm glad that they do end up doing that. But the village sets up this weird cross, and they tie Dom to it, and Dom is calling them fucking stupid pricks, and Luke is trying to get out from his restraints. He's trying to break his thumb and everything. Luke does end up getting out just in time for Dom to get sacrificed. What he sees is his wife Gail step out of the forest, and she puts her hands on either side of his cheek, and then she picks him up. But we see these yellow eyes, and we see the weird head of this thing, and it looks like a human upside down or something. It looks really freaky. But this monster proceeds to pick up Dom and put him in the trees like the rest. But Luke does get out, but this woman comes in, so he has to pretend like he is still restrained by putting his hands behind his back. And they ask her, will you at least take him out of the tree? And she's like, no, we never take them out of the tree. And she kind of explains what the monster is and says that it is one of the Jotun, which is a bastard child of Loki. That's not what Jotun means. Jotun means like giant, but they worship it, and it makes them like live a lot longer, like hundreds of years, I'm assuming. But they worship it, and they want Luke to as well, because Luke has the same mark that they all do, because he knows true pain or something. But Luke does end up leaving the room after she does, and he goes upstairs, goes into this room where there's like some freaky sounds going on. But he grabs this torch and he goes in there, and there are like all these bodies, kind of bodies, but they are still alive. So Luke makes the smart decision and starts burning them all, which is great. And he steps out of this room, steps downstairs, and this old woman from earlier pops up. And the funniest fucking moment, Luke knocks her out. I mean, I'm just glad that he got that in. But Luke knocks her out, and let's see. Yeah. Luke does knock her out, and he steps into this room where it's like all the old stuff that they've collected over the years. And he gets this rifle with 2 bullets, which, another thing, if I'm getting a gun and I know I'm fighting some demigod of a monster, I'm not just going to grab 2 bullets. I mean, that's all he found, but I would have grabbed any other weapon that I can find in there. If I can find other calibers, I'll grab other guns, stuff like that. But yes, he does get this gun, 2 bullets, and he steps out, and this guy shows up, and Luke is like, fuck off. And he tries to shoot him, and the gun clicks, so he's like fidgeting with the bolt, and he's like, just fuck off. And this guy's like trying to talk to him, like he's got his hands up and surrender almost. And then Luke does end up shooting him. But Luke grabs this guy's axe, and he sees the monster through the door because the door is pissed off that its worshippers are getting burned to death. So Luke does see this thing through the door, and it looks creepy as all get out. So he tries to go out a different way, and he does escape. And then this is when we see the really, really cool full shot of the monster standing with the fire going on in the background. Looks really awesome. And Luke proceeds to crouch down, and he does shoot it, I think, but it doesn't do much. He shoots it, and then he runs, and he proceeds to see the liquor store again while he's running, and he gets shoved by this thing. Like, damn near tackled. But he sees the hatchet, so he gets up and he tries to walk away, and this thing proceeds to push him down and puts Luke on his knees, and it starts to do this weird totem pole stand thing where it stands all the way up, and it looks really creepy, looks really cool. I love it. But Luke proceeds to stand up and gets put on his knees again to pray. And yeah, this thing pushes him down like hard. But he grabs this hatchet, and then he sees Rob like in the back, kind of like, you need to grab that, you need to escape. But he ends up standing up again, and this thing comes crashing down, and Luke proceeds to hack it in like the head with this hatchet, and then he takes off running, and he ends up breaking into like more of an open spot, and he gets out of the forest, and this thing, we learn, cannot leave the forest. So he escapes, and this thing roars, and Luke roars back, and it's a very satisfying feeling. But Luke does end up walking, and we see the camera kind of get higher and higher, and then we see a road off in the distance. So we can only assume that Luke does survive, and he escaped. So that would be the end of the movie. Now, let's try and... Oh, shoot. Hold up. Sorry. I'm over here messing up. But now let's try and get some trivia facts in. The film was actually shot in the Carpathian Mountains of Romania. It was not filmed in Sweden. That can also be kind of made apparent with the forest, because the forest, there like isn't a forest like that on the King's Trail, but the original tagline that was used when advertising the film was they should have gone to Vegas, but there was a massacre in Vegas that took place on October 1st, 2017. So the tagline was changed to they should have gone to Ibiza. The sign the hikers see on the trees near the cabin is the last rune of the Futhark, which is an ancient Germanic alphabet calling Odal or Othala. It is pronounced O and means property. Yeah, this part. The actual Kungsleden, which means King's Path in Sweden, has little to no trees and is a barren heath akin to the Scottish Highlands. Besides the Thola/Odal rune, the Algis, also called Alhaz rune, can be seen on the trees and as the shape of a sacrificial pole. Algis is the name conventionally given to the Z rune of the Elder Futhark runic alphabet from the common Germanic word for elk, and it is thought to represent the divine might of the universe. The film was shot in Romania rather than Sweden due to Romania offering tax credits and softer labor laws. So, hold on. Oh, I was getting some more coffee in me. But the creature in the film is actually based on a Jotun race of Jotnar from Norse mythology. This is mentioned with captions turned on and was what the woman in the cabin identified the creature as to Luke. Though the film takes place in Sweden, none of the locals are played by Swedish actors. instead being played by Danish, English, and Romanian actors. The film was based on the novel by Adam Neville and produced by Andy Serkis. The Ritual premiered in September 2017 at the Toronto International Film Festival, where its international distribution rights were sold to Netflix for $4.75 million. Okay, this is a long one. In bringing the creature to the screen, a hybrid approach was taken. The motor was fully digital. Hold on. Okay. The motor was fully digital during complex actions or distant shots. Invisible's digital model featured realistic skeleton and muscle simulations. The animation was based on reference footage of canines and equines. I don't know what that is, but it is a full-size practical head section with a performer inside maneuvering its arms. Was built by Russell EFX for the sequences where the creature interacts with the actors. Said shots were completed with the proper digital removal of the performer's head and compositing of the rest of the creature's body. Bruckner explained, the head actually has a stunt performer inside of it that is kind of wearing prosthetic arms, and then we would go into the computer and paint out her head. Basically, because it was kind of invisible in the front and the prosthetic head was used both for wire work, and we had it on kind of unit jib out in the woods. A lot of that is what Rafe is interacting with. Initially, the filmmakers wanted to use the practical head section more, an approach that proved unfeasible. Still, the practical element gave an invaluable contribution to the on-screen results. Originally, we wanted to diffuse images of the prosthetic head in the wide shots with the digital body itself, under the assumption that the brain knows on some primordial level that it's looking at light on real objects, or sort of visually rendered objects, but we found that was increasingly hard to fuse those things together visually. Usually, once a shot becomes digital, most of what you're seeing becomes digital. Just makes more sense from a cost perspective. Josh and Sierra brought a lot to the table where that head was concerned, and it was not an easy construction. It's really... Hold on. I just lost my... Where? Where was I? And it's really great to have on set too, because everybody was looking at some concept drawing and getting a sense of what they're dealing with. And then you wheel that thing out and it just... You can feel the energy on set change. Suddenly everybody has a greater sense of what they're dealing with and something else to look at. Overall, Bruckner was satisfied with the results. The beast design we finally settled on was simply the one I couldn't take my eyes off of, he said. I think anyone who's familiar with Thompson's work can tell through and through that this is one of his uncanny creations. He concluded, Thompson has literalized, if this makes sense, some of the expression that I felt were coming across in conversation. It was the idea that it had a human quality about it, despite the fact that it was very much an animal, and just presented us with something that I felt I could never unsee again. Rafe Spall, who plays Luke, and Sam Troughton, who plays Dom, are both part of the Alien franchise. Spall is in Prometheus, and Troughton is in Alien vs. Predator. That doesn't have anything to do with this movie, but just a little bit of trivia right there. Though it's not revealed in the film, the small witch, at least in the original novel, is revealed to have hooves instead of feet, giving her loud footsteps which can still be heard in the film adaptation. In this one, I have not noticed, but it says throughout the film the creature's two eyes can be seen in shots of the forest. In the final act of the movie, the cultists can be heard chanting the word blote. I don't know what that means, but this refers to the Asatruar ritual practice of offering food, alcoholic beverages, and on occasions, human sacrifices to the gods whose favors they sought. Creature in the film bears a resemblance to the beast of Slavic folklore, the Leshy. It is a wooden guardian spirit that takes a variety of forms. The way the monster hangs its victims in the cultist village mirrors part of Astroar mythology about Odin, who originally gained wisdom and knowledge of rune magic by hanging himself from the world tree Yggdrasil by impaling himself on his spear. Gungnir in Astroar mythology, the spear was given to Odin by Loki, though it is unclear if this is an intended reference to Astroar mythology. Early on in the film, in the scene after the convenience store murder, as the campers are waking up, Hutch, Phil, and Dom exit their tents and the order that they end up dying, which I did not notice. Hold on, let me take a sip of coffee. Oh, that's good. Okay. But the stone image occultists briefly seen praying before is a reproduction of the Kirby Stevens stone, which is believed to be a representation of Loki. The creature in the film is identified as a Jotun, one of the bastard children of Loki, which is commonly called a giant in modern terms. Although not mentioned in the film, only in the novel, the creature's name is Moder, Norse for mother, in the movie. It is said it is a son of Loki. However, in the novel, it is female. Towards the end, when Luke is fleeing the Moder monster, the Jotun, and it hurls him away in the forest, the stock Wilhelm scream can be heard. And the rune seen in the early part of the movie on the trees, as well as in the final act on Luke and the cultists, is the Othala/Odal rune from the Elder Futhark. It is the rune for O in the ancient Ren language of the Vikings, and is typically thought of as Odin's rune, though it also stands for heritages or estate. Okay, this one. The rifle Luke uses near the end appears to be a World War II German K98 car or a Mauser. And despite being based on a novel written a few years before the film's release, some scenes of the film are based on the horror film Rituals from 1977, which I did not know that. Okay. Oh, God, we're actually past an hour long episode. This is the longest episode I have had. Well, like I said, I love this movie. And I think that anyone and everyone should go and check this movie out, even if you're not even a horror fan. This is a good movie. And it's really not all that scary. There's a couple scenes that are creepy, but I wouldn't say that this movie is openly scary. But I hope that you all have a wonderful day. Please rate, subscribe, follow, whatever. I do have an Instagram. Go and check that out. But yeah, I hope that you all have a wonderful day. I really did enjoy talking about this movie. Like I said, I love this movie. I love the pacing of it. I love the cast. I love the acting. I love the monster. I love the cult. I love the setting. Everything about this movie is really, really good. Even if you do watch it and you don't like it, if it's not for you, at least you can say you gave it a chance. But I did tell the author, Adam Neville, I did tell him that his book, The Ritual, may end up being the first book that I cover on the podcast, because early on I did say that I did want to cover books, but it's a little bit weird. They're going to be shorter episodes because I cannot read the book, and I cannot really talk about the book all the way through, because it's really not that different, at least for the first half. It's not that different. The reason why Dom and Luke fought is different and stuff like that. But yeah. So yeah, everybody go have a wonderful day. I enjoy the episode. Thank you so very much. Bye bye.